Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to Uncaged Leaders. I'm your host, Mariquita Solis, the Uncaged Heart Coach. So, this show is dedicated to the man who, on paper, has it all: the successful life, the house, the cars, everything, the stocks. Who's set? But he's fighting that soul war inside, that flat life, wondering what's going on here. So this show is dedicated to him so that he can build a life of genuine authenticity, courage, and purpose and live the exciting, robust, colorful life that's out there for all of us. So, and you might say, why are you here? You're a woman. Well, I studied at the Institute for Women-Centered Coaching, Training, and Leadership. And I actually also worked as a residential treatment coordinator in residential treatment center with little boys ages 5 to 10. And I experienced that shutting down process that little boys do when they learn they have to shut down their feelings and turn away from who they are. So watching that and seeing them struggle with emotional regulation really broke my heart. So I'm an empath and highly sensitive, and I'm exhibiting many of those characteristics that we've been taught to are weak, right? Well, I'll just tell you right now, I'm very soft, but I'm not weak. I'm very strong. I'm a leader in many capacities, and I have a very strong voice, and I'm going to use it for men and for all humanity. So, anyway, that's a little bit about me and about who I serve and my dedication to this cause. And so today I have another exciting guest, the Honorable Darren Lewis. Now he is fighting for the same cause of helping and mentoring and serving our world, our boys and our men. Darren founded and officially launched Fathering Adventures in July 2008. And until then, Darren had worked in the construction consulting engineering industry since 1988 and managed his own structural design and drafting service since since the year 2000. The pain of past of I mean he now I'm stumbling. So Darren works with fathers and sons and fathers and daughters, you know, trying to get ahead of what's going on in their lives so that nobody has to live that wounded life, so that they can connect and they can have that freedom in life with the healthy connections. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited to talk to you, Darren, because um, I've had some wonderful conversations with you, and I see how you're leading men towards that path of authentic manhood, right? Helping them to face and resolve wounds from their past and giving them the courage. Showing them that the courage is inside of them to empower them to lead successful lives as men and in their workplaces and as fathers and husbands, and bringing that out in that you're bringing that gusto of life out in them. Sometimes we get sidetracked, but I know that you see it in them and that you are the voice to bring that joy back into their lives. By doing this with the small groups, retreats, and other formats that you do it in, like speaking engagements and everything. And also knowing that you did not have the smoothest past as a child. Um, so that's going to be something we talk about. So just before Father's Day in 2011, Darren had the great honor and privilege of being awarded the title of Queensland Father of the Year at a luncheon in the state's capital. So that's an amazing honor. And Darren has also been married to his wife, Melissa, since 1991. They lived in Townsville in tropical North Queensland, Australia, and have 4 adult sons. And Darren believes in living what he teaches, and I see that. So his spare time is usually devoted to intentional one-on-one time with his beloved wife, Melissa, each of their sons, their 2 daughters-in-law, and their 3 precious grandchildren. And Melissa describes Darren as being honest, intelligent, discerning, trustworthy, loving, compassionate, hardworking, self-motivated, self-disciplined, self-sacrificing, honorable, and courageous. And I second that. So thank you for joining us, Darren. And I know that you are very humble and what a gift you are. I mean, I see that you are shining in the light of God and how beautiful that is to see that in you and to welcome you to this show.
Well, thank you, Mariquita. I've never kind of had an intro like that. In all of the years I've been, interviewed all over. I've never been called honorable, the honorable dance. It's not like I'm royalty or anything. So I really appreciate that. Something you said in that intro, actually, it, I just have things come to me, right? And a lot of the times they're movie clips. And you were talking about men kind of coming to this place of reawakening, and the movie clip that came to me was from the movie The Matrix, and there's this pivotal point in the movie when Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, he's they've been inside the Matrix, him and Trinity. They've gotten to this phone booth. Trinity beams through back into the real life, and she's sitting there with Morpheus, and and Neo's about to take the call to go on through, and then this agent kind of wakes up, shoots the phone, and what they're meant to do is they're meant to run in those things because these agents, these kind of computer programs, if you will, in this unreality that is the Matrix, can't be defeated. And so, but Neo didn't run in that moment. And Trinity said, "Why isn't he running?" And Morpheus has this big grin on his face and he says, "He's beginning to believe." And I think that's the first step for men is to begin to believe that there is more, that they have more within them. And I think that's such a gulf right there that they can kind of step into and believe that there's something bigger for them is huge. And you can watch the rest of the Matrix movie and you'll see who he becomes. But anyhow, at least the first Matrix movie. So sorry. Was there a question in that, Mariquita, or was that just response to your very generous introduction?
That was your response, and it was very gracious. I love it. And yes, sometimes people are not aware, men and women don't see, they just see the gray. They don't see the color out there. And so I feel like that both of us really are really trying to show them there's a beautiful technicolor world out there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so and we're here to to help you open your eyes to the beauty of who you are. And there's so much more to you that maybe you can't see, but we can see it.
Yes, exactly. And that's why we need others. We need community around us to help point that out. Because we're all aware of our failings. We know that ourselves, but we have people that remind us of our failings. But very few of us kind of actually get to look in the mirror and see something glorious. And so to actually have people around you that see that glory in you, and help to, lift you up to see that glory be realized is huge. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
Wonderful. All right. So I'd love to hear about your childhood. Well, I've heard some of it, but I would love for our audience to hear about that. And it was a bumpy childhood. So tell us about your father and your relationship with him.
Yeah, look, I mean, I personally don't see my childhood as being so as special in any way. I think that most people's childhoods weren't great, at least the men that I
Yeah.
meet. So I don't want to, make it any more dramatic than it needs to be. But the reality is yeah, well, and some of these things you're going to hear for the first time too. So I remember the one of my very first memories was at the age of just 3, and my mother pulled me aside and she said to me, she said, "Look, your father and I have been having a conversation, and we believe that it's time that you have a little brother or sister." And so she was telling me ultimately at the age of 3 that she was pregnant, that I was going to have a little brother or sister. Internally, what I said was I said, great, I'm going to have to take care of this child at the age of 3
Wow.
because I knew that my father and my mother and their relationship, their marriage was dysfunctional, highly dysfunctional. They they weren't in the same bed, different bedrooms, and they literally came together to conceive a child and then went back to the way that they were. They neither were happy. Um, and I'm speaking through the eye, through the lenses of a boy, of a young boy. Um, I I don't have a lot of really fond memories of my dad. So I lost my dad 21 and a half years ago, um, to uh, alcoholism, to liver disease. He was an alcoholic. And he was a workaholic. And so, I really didn't have too much time with him at all. So he was in the home, but he was gone before the sun rose, and so before I got out of bed. And he was gone all day, and he didn't come home until the sun went down because he used to put up steel frame buildings. He was a rigger, scaffolder, crane driver, ran his own business in that industry. And so he would come home and he would, every single day, like, so he worked at least 6 days a week. And he came home with a carton of Forex beers, like these heavy beers. And he would just proceed. He'd crack the first one open, start drinking it. And meanwhile, he'd be putting the other 23 beers in the fridge for the evening. And by the time he got to putting the final beer in there, he didn't need to worry about that because he'd already finished the first one. So he cracked open the second one and he went down and sat in front of the television. And he would always look at something, and I really didn't know what he was looking at. And again, now fast forwarding through towards the end of his life, and I was about 33. Um, I came to realize that what I believed my dad to be, a workaholic and an alcoholic, was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Um, he was, verbally abusive, mentally abusive. He was physically abusive. Uh, it was rough, but again, I wouldn't say any rougher than other stories that I've heard. Um, and and yeah, mum and dad went their separate ways at 16. But what I was going to say is at 33, that's when I really, when he was dying, 3 weeks before he died, um, and he'd gone into a coma and came out of this coma that he wasn't meant to come out of. We had this conversation, and I asked him, I said, "Tell me your story, Dad." And he shared his story because you see, we didn't our time together. He didn't play with me. He didn't sit down with me and ask me how my life was doing, how school, or there wasn't any of that. There wasn't conversation. There were no hugs, growing up. It was, I was disciplined when I needed to be. Well, even when I didn't need to be disciplined, I was disciplined. The buckle end of the belt. There were some rough moments in there, but it sent me a message that you're not special. I don't really love you, and I think we need to understand this, that as men, as women, as husbands, as wives, as fathers, as mothers, we everything we do and everything we don't do sends a message. And the message that was sent to me, the message that I received from my dad was, you're not important. There's nothing special about you, and you're just in the way. And that's not the message that a child should be receiving from his or her parents. And so, yeah, but I came to learn at the end of his life that he himself was wounded. His father was the town drunk, for starters, and he hated his dad for that. And so he became that which he hated, and that's not all too uncommon either. But his sister was killed in a motor vehicle accident. She was riding his bike because he told his mum that he didn't want to ride his bike over and buy his father this loaf of bread that his father eats. And so his sister volunteered, jumped on my father's bicycle and started riding across town, got hit and killed. And she was just shy of 12 years of age, and my dad was 8. And what I didn't realize when I was a boy was that my dad had blamed himself for his sister's death. And so his workaholism was really about avoiding the pain. If I'm busy, then this shame, this guilt, this pain that I have for my sister's death, um, won't be constantly, biting at me. And so, of course, when he was at home and he couldn't be busy, he would drink. He would anesthetize the pain, so he wouldn't feel that pain. And again, we all have our different vices, but that's not, again, not too dissimilar to most people's life stories, sadly. So nothing remarkable, but certainly when you ask the question of, well, what was your relationship like with your dad? Well, it was pretty non-existent. Hmm. Sadly.
Yeah, that's very sad. And I think many people, I mean, people are put in, I mean, they are parents, but they don't have the skills of parenting, or they don't know how to parent. And that's not their fault, but they never learned it. They do the best they can, and they're carrying their wounds and unintentionally put those wounds on their children because they don't know. I mean, they're struggling themselves just to keep themselves afloat. And if you're just keeping
Hmm.
yourself afloat, then what do you have to give to someone else?
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. And so I needed to forgive my dad, and my dad did a lot wrong, but I needed to forgive him because my dad was going to die, and did die, and it was possible, for me to carry that woundedness for the rest of my life had I not been healed of that wound. And so actually, I had actually, gone through that process probably about 4 years before my dad passed away, which I'm so pleased about because I'm somebody that doesn't like to have regrets. And so, because I had done that work, done that healing work, and had been healed of my father wound, um, I was able to I was able to be my father's carer when he was sick. So obviously, liver disease is something that, it's a long drawn out, awful wasting away, really, organs shutting down and so on. And so there was a lot of care, especially, in the last 12 to 12 months, the last 2 years. But certainly 4 years before I started caring for my dad. And again, I'm so glad that I did. Um, I'm a firm believer in honoring your father and mother. Um, Mind you, being real about a situation, like, me sharing that story with you, is not dishonoring. That's just being real. That's just being truthful. But I was able to honor him. I actually had the great privilege of, officiating his funeral, and I kind of did it in a way that I really felt that, he would have approved, and yet it was also a relatively short time because he wouldn't have wanted people there for a long time, but it was a short time of reflection, not just on who my dad was, but ourselves. Looking back, and that there's this, you heard the phrase as wise as Solomon. So Solomon was the king of Israel 3,000 years ago. And I'm going to paraphrase him here, but here's what he says. He says that it's better to go to a funeral than a party because at the funeral, you consider your own end. And so I really kind of leveraged that. I utilized that to say one day we're all going to be in that box. So, and we've got, on your little plaque or headstone or whatever, you've got your date of birth, you've got your date of death, and you've got this little hyphen in between. What does that hyphen represent? It represents your life. So what needs to, and how do you want to be remembered when we're gathering in this situation, when people, family members, friends are gathering, how do you want them to remember you? and what steps do you have to take now to ensure they are the conversations people have about you as opposed to other conversations. So yeah. So it's great to honor him. Mm.
Yeah, and I understand what you mean about telling your story and it's not like you're slandering, you're just telling the truth. Just like my father was not, I don't feel like he was close to me and it wasn't his fault. He was providing what he thought was what he should do, but then there was that wall up, we couldn't cross that wall. So, yeah, and I'm sad too that we just didn't. I don't have any stories, really, any stories of his childhood. It is sad. So,
Mm.
yeah. So, yeah, I'm grateful for what you're doing and for your willingness to share here.
Mm. And yes, we're trying to through what I do today predominantly is not so much dig into that wound or even see people heal of that wound. Maybe make people aware of that it's there, but help fathers to not wound their sons and daughters, to help equip experientially for those dads to be able to understand and to be able to give, what their kids need from them, and so preventing that father wounding from that. Prevention's better than cure. So that's kind of where we like to go. We've kind of done both, where we've kind of done the whole counseling thing and help people. But people's life stories are complex, and it takes if you're sitting in front of somebody in their 50s or 60s, they've got quite a story to tell, and there's a lot that's gone down in that 50 or 60 years, and so the healing can sometimes take quite a period of time, and again, that's why the prevention is better than cure. If we can kind of help to give dads a clue, give them an idea, give them an experience where they're learning, discovering, but they're also actually, engaging with their sons or their daughters in that moment, seeing the fruitfulness of what they're doing in those moments. That we're kind of guaranteed, and they're guaranteed that they can continue the journey beyond the experiences that we provide.
Yes, definitely trying to get out there before I mean, we want to get out there before these things happen to build the connection so that, I mean, there is no linear path. So we know there are going to be bumps so that if you can have a better foundation built, and that's what you're doing with your
Yeah,
programs.
exactly.
Yeah. So, so let's talk about a father being a guide as opposed to being a hero. So tell me about that way of thinking. What's the difference?
Well, so here's the thing is, can I just say back up? I'm a movie guy,
Yeah.
you know that about me. I've kind of I, I loved, I was like 7 years of age when the first original Star Wars movie came out, 1977. Remember sitting at a drive-in watching Star Wars, in a galaxy far, far away, and you saw young Luke Skywalker, this young man who's kind of like looking up into space, and there's a story that's gone on long before that, and of course many, 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 decades later, that obviously we had the prequels, and so we kind of got a glimpse into that story. Um, but here he was, this guy, and he kind of had a heroic heart, but he wasn't a hero, right? And how could he get from where he was on this little planet of Tatooine, this sandy planet, to flying and to flying his X-wing, to blowing up the Death Star and kind of having this great big celebration with the Rebel Alliance, kind of pushing back the evil Galactic Empire. Well, here's the thing: is he needed help, and so he needed to have Obi-Wan Kenobi, or Ben Kenobi, to kind of help guide him in the Force, and
Mhm.
and then when Ben Kenobi died, then he needed Yoda to kind of finish the job, and then he became the hero. Um, so the position that I have is that fathers, they want to be, they have a heart like Luke Skywalker, they want to be a hero to their kids. We're made to experience that, but the problem is that they don't know how to go from where they are to being that hero. And there's a lot of grace. Well, I think when kids are really young, typically that sort of 0 to 7, dad can do no wrong for the most part, unless he's making a real meal of it. And you kind of are that hero, but staying that hero for a little bit longer is really hard. So so that's kind of where they need a guide, a mentor, if you will, a father figure, somebody who can help to take them from where they are to some other place. We all need that. We all need a guide. And so my desire is certainly in those earlier years is to help their fathers be the hero to their kids that they need them to be. Because I think before that a father can become a guide, he needs to first be a hero. And he needs to be a hero so that his son or daughter can look up to him and kind of realize, I either want to be like him or I want to one day marry somebody like him. Um, and so here they are, watching on, the hero is building relationship with them, respect is kind of, beginning to flow. And it's in that kind of, again, this next transition, the transition into the next season of life where the kids enter their teenage years. um, Again, they're not going to be looking to you as the hero, and you need to shift gears and become the guides that they need. So, for a boy becoming a young man or eventually an authentic man, he needs a dad to guide him. And he needs his dad to be, and a daughter needs his dad to be involved actively, but not just dad, obviously needs mum as well, because she knows that she's going to become a woman like mum, but actually dad not being passive in that moment, but helping to remind his wife or her mother that she's needed in this moment, and inviting the other women into that journey of it, inviting them in to be mentors to his daughter. So so I look back at my adolescence and I ask men, about their journeys through adolescence, and if I was to ask you, I'm sure that it wouldn't be so dissimilar. Although again, I think it's trickier for men. A girl will get her first period and she kind of knows that there's something happening. There's this, I'm becoming an adult. For a boy, it's trickier. It's like you don't know, and okay, things might begin to change and so on. But my experience and the experience of so many other men that I speak with, it's literally wandering around in the dark and stumbling and tripping and kind of just trying to work your way through. You've got no one to help you navigate those tricky paths. We do some whitewater rafting up at the Tully River, and the Tully River is what's known as a technical river. They held the World Championships there in 2018, I think, right before COVID. And so there's a lot of boulders, and so as a guy, as a river guide, you need to be able to move your raft around and bounce off rocks and things to find a safe way down the river. I've rafted that river now for hundreds of times, but and I could probably manage my way down there. But if you're as a novice, you try and steer a raft down that river on your own, it won't end well for you. And so you need a guide. You need a river guide. And again, dad is that guide, certainly for his sons, but has an important part to play in the lives of his daughters as well. When the white waters of life kind of, kick in, you want to make sure that you're present, that you kind of can help interpret for them. And again, you need that stable foundation of relationship with them so they can look to you and understand your heart. That is there for me to be able to help me navigate through these tricky times. I'm not going to push him away. And so that's how it can be done well. So does that kind of answer your question? I think that there is a need for a hero, but then there's a time where you need to use that as a platform to become a guide, yeah, for your sons and daughters. And ultimately, that's you continue to be that, letting more and more rope out, kind of, to the point where they become adults and they become your equals, they become your co-peers. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, definitely. And that's very intentional what you're saying. It's not, it's, and intention is rare. Seems like these days we can really be on autopilot and think, well, I'm just going to just get through it without preparation or without thought. And so intention is crucial for relationships. And I'm not talking about charting out every every step of a relationship or anything. I'm talking about the intentionality of what needs to be the foundation of a healthy relationship. What are you bringing to the table? You know, your integrity, your honesty, your and your willingness to fail and get up and be resilient, and knowing that life is organic, and in all relationships and all challenges of life, that you've got to be ready and be prepared as much as possible, but also a balanced flow in life and trusting life, spirit, God, and not trying to be the God controller of your own life or anyone else's.
Yeah, I think that actually when things go wrong, um, that's what we call teachable moments. Like, so even with a guide, even somebody that's kind of, if you're journeying with your son or your daughter and something goes wrong, you're again able to sort of say, hey, things go wrong. Here's what you do when things go wrong. It's just another opportunity to be a teachable moment. And as parents, we need to be looking out for those things, kind of recalibrating our lenses to help, because those are goals when they do happen. So yeah, there's the late Stephen Covey wrote a book called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective Leaders, I think it was, or Highly Effective People. And I think habit number two was begin with the end in mind.
Mhm.
And that's intentionality right there. It's like understanding that our sons and our daughters at some point are going to leave our home. And so what are they going to leave home with? And again, what do we need to impart to them before they leave home? And you don't want to try and rush it sort of at the age of 18 or 21 or whatever it might be when they eventually leave home, maybe 30. But you want to make sure that you're kind of drip feeding them these
Right.
things, training, instructing, uh, coaching, just a guiding, like we need to be doing these things. And so we need to be able to ask ourselves the question of what do we want that to look like? What do we want them to leave home with? And to start taking steps now. That's in essence what intentionality is. Being an intentional father is really all about that. And where I think a lot of parents get tricked up is they think that oh, I've got time to do that, and
Oh,
that's really quite sad because we don't. The thing is our lives, I think, if we're honest, are getting busier and busier, and so we're not going to have more time tomorrow than we had yesterday. But the other thing is that research tells us that age 15 and a half is the tipping point whereby teenagers spend more time with their peer groups than they will with family members. And so your level of influence in their lives after 15 and a half begins to diminish, and at least for a while.
mhm.
And so, you really want that first 15 and a half years to be as intentional as possible to be able to give them the things that they need. Things like um, knowing your heart for them, things like knowing dad's story, things like knowing dad's character, seeing that, and dad's kind of doing whatever he needs to do to make sure that that character is a character because he understands that they're going to reflect that character. So if I need to dig and change what's going on now for that to happen, then that's what I'm going to do. Things like identity, bestowing a clear and compelling identity upon them, who this is who you are, because we get all of these messages, online, from schools and things, and they're bestowing identity, but they're more often than not, they're not a healthy identity. So having a father and a mother, again, just together singing the chorus of who they are, reminding them of who they are. Um, Things like rites of passage, being able to invite them up and into higher ground, young manhood, young womanhood, authentic manhood, authentic womanhood, and playing an active part in that, helping to define what manhood and womanhood is, so that they know the difference between being a child and being an adult, but also having a moment that's marked and celebrated, whereby they know that they're no longer a little boy or a little girl, they're now a young man or a young woman, and here's what's expected of them. Um, and having a father, especially, but mum as well, who can help them to unlock, to decipher, to know that they have a transcendent cause, a cause, a purpose that's greater than themselves. Um, you know, Mums and dads, we need to be watching our children and learning who they are, how they're wired and being able to speak that over them. And because we know that when we're seeing the way, when we're understanding how our kids are wired, how they're built, kind of gives clues into what they're meant to do, And so, to again to play an active role in that and to not send them the message that it's a tricky one again, because when they're young, they need to know that they're really special, that they're priceless, that they're the apple of your eye, that they're your beloved son or daughter. But at the same time, especially during those teenage years, to ensure that they have the message that you're not the center of the universe. You're not. And if you think that you are, and if mum and dad don't help you understand that you're not, then you're going to have a rude awakening. You're going to go into the workplace thinking that you're the center of the universe, thinking that you could manage the store or whatever it might be better than the current manager. I mean, it's not going to go well for you. So it's really, yeah, being actively intentional is so important. Mm.
Yeah, I love that. And so I know that we talked before and you said that the father is, I mean, for the daughter, like that he's the oxygen for his daughter. And I loved the way you described that. And so why are father, I mean, and when I say father, I mean father figures, the father role. I mean, it might not be the traditional father, but the masculine. What is so important about that with a daughter?
Yeah, well, she's meant to receive that. And she knows that she's meant to receive that. She longs to receive those things. And yet, in the absence of a dad, some, again, intentional father figure or an intentional mother who intentionally invites a man in that she can trust, that can offer those things. I call them the three A's: the attention, so love, attention, affection, and affirmation. And if she doesn't receive those three things early on in her journey, and when I say early on, I don't mean just once. Like it's a continual, again, reminder of who she is and whose she is, and then she will go looking for it from another masculine source. And there are so many boys out there who are more than willing to be able to give her attention, affection, and affirmation, but they're not doing that from a healthy place. They're doing that so that they might receive something from her, give me something. They're looking for their own validation in themselves, these boys, but they know what to do. I mean, the boys boys have been groomed, to not by their dads. They've been
Uh-huh.
groomed by um, oh, what's the guy's name that the two brothers and the manosphere that they created. I forget his name now, but you know th these boys have been groomed to know how to what a girl needs, and so they go and use that, but they're using it for their own purposes as opposed to using it to remind her who she is, to build her up, to give her life. It's about taking that for themselves. And so, yeah, she's meant to receive those things from their dad. There's a beautiful, it's not, it's not necessarily a beautiful song, but it's an important song that dads need to be aware of, and it's called Daughters by John Mayer. And I think John Mayer is an incredible songwriter and very thought out, lyrically, and he's a great guitarist. Not a bad singer too. He wrote this song called Daughters, and he did it because of all of the relationships he had, of which he's had many. Um, Something that he learnt was these girls, these women that he was dating, like all had daddy issues. And so he writes this song called Daughters, and he says, Fathers, be good to your daughters because you are the God and the weight of her world. And so he knows this, and dads need to know this. Dads, you are so very important to your sons and your daughters. Both need you so much, not just your sons. Your sons need you absolutely, but your daughters need you too. They need that affirmation, that validation. They need that appropriate affection, those hugs, those kisses. Um, yeah, they need you to be focusing in on them. Hey, what how's life, hey, take them out on daddy daughter dates, right? Take them out for a meal, pull back the chair and open the car door, and again, all of these ways to remind her this is the way that a man or boys are meant to treat you. You are a princess, and don't settle for anything less. And fathers need to be training their sons to be able to offer that as well. Um, yeah, it's there.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting. I just think about my own childhood. And so it was like, there was like, yes, I got that till a certain age, and then it stopped. I think it stopped, about, it must have been when I turned,
13.
yeah, I was about to say 12 or 13, then it was over. And then
Yep.
I desperately tried to find it, in broken relationship after broken relationship after broken relationship. And I put up with nothing. I mean, from the relationships, I mean, scraps, right? Because I
Yep.
did, yeah,
Yep.
because I
Take
was
what you can
struggling.
get. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's very normal. And I talk about this with dads of daughters um because what happens is no matter how good a dad you are, you've fallen, we know our brokenness, and we know that that exists in there. Again, it's not the most true part of who we are. But we can believe that it is, especially in the absence of having other men around us reminding us of who we are, a wife that's reminding us of who we are and how important we are in our children's roles in their lives. But what happens is when girls begin to, so that dads will be all over their daughters when they're young and so on. But then as their daughters begin to blossom, begin to develop, begin to enter in and move through adolescence, um, all of a sudden there's bumps in places where there weren't. Dad is kind of like, I don't want to be not just inappropriate, but to
Yeah.
be seen to be inappropriate. And I don't want to, you know, touch something I shouldn't touch, and just got, like it's like everything stops. And it's just like, whoa, okay, right, it's time for me to just kind of put that. And again, sadly, what that does is it sends their daughter a message. And the message quite often is what's wrong with me? Like, because I had that from dad, and now dad is pulling back from me. And sometimes if she thinks about it enough, she'll go, well, it's only just been really since I've started developing, since I've, and so femininity, my body is a bad thing. This is the response that it can have on men. And so, of course, she doesn't want to believe that. And so she'll go out and try and get that. And again, there's plenty of boys that'll kind of, you know, give her what she needs or what they think she needs. And again, it's always going to fall short. But yeah, that's ultimately it's fear. Men like to have the big bravado. I'm not afraid of anything, but the reality is we're afraid of everything. There is so much going on there that we may not even necessarily process ourselves, but yeah. And it's kind of like pressing through. It's like, okay, this is awkward. I mean, I actually found that with my sons, like even just to do it. Like I remember my eldest son when he was 15, I remember coming into my office and he gave me a kiss goodnight, put his arms around me and hugged. And I turned around to him and I said, Brandon, when you were younger, I used to kiss and cuddle and blow raspberries on your tummy and, just wrestle with you and stuff. And I said, I don't understand this, but it was easier then. Um, right now, you're teaching me like the importance of this. So please don't ever stop. Please don't ever stop seeking out those hugs and kisses and so on, because like this is an area of growth in me. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it relates back to my relationships with my families, but my family of origin, um, but I know that this is right, and thank you for helping me. I mean, your kids can become your guides if you let them, in that sense. So it's a tricky thing because sometimes, during adolescence, girls can also, they got a lot going on, and so sometimes they can also push dads away. And what's really important to know is that as a dad, don't take that rejection as being final. I remember reading a book, a female author, so a daughter herself, and she was a counselor, and she was on a plane. She was taking a group to Haiti or something like that. They were doing some kind of missions trip, and the whole way, this young woman next to her was just weeping, and she sort of said, "Look, what's going on? What's going on?" In the end, this young woman said to her, a while back, I pushed my father away. I told him I didn't want him near me. And the counselor's kind of wondering, like, well, what's going on? Like, what happened? When she drilled down there, she said, I just wish my father hadn't listened to me. Because so there's all these kinds of things that are going on, all of these dynamics, and sometimes if we take and so many dads do, we're human beings. Um, they receive rejection or perceive rejection, and then that becomes the final call on it. And again, I urge dads, encourage dads, don't let that be the final thing. Check in with her. Honey, I know you want to have some boundaries up. You don't want me real close right now. I just want you to know when you're ready, would you please let me know? Because, so you kind of be the adult in the situation and understand that she's going through a lot, and this isn't going to be the final word on our relationship. I mean, I have beautiful relationship with my daughter-in-laws. I just love them a bit. They're mine. Like they like they grew up in our home. And so yeah, I don't. You push through in those periods of, or maybe. I mean, I've taken them out on dates. Out for a meal, out for a movie or whatever, and love it. And they've loved it. So yeah, we've got to push through and understand that you're the dad, and you know that they need you, and you don't want you don't want this separation to exist. You are important no matter what. And here's the thing is you're important for the rest of your lives. Like for the rest of as dads, it's like many dads make the mistake of oh, now she's marrying you, and now you take, and that's not the case at all. you can have dads who it's like a game of football. You can be doing really well up to half time, but then you can blow a massive lead and end up losing the game. And so having even as an adult daughter, you know, you still need that attention, affection, and affirmation from fathers, from father figures, from good men, even when you're married and you're getting that from your husband. It's not the same. I remember my wife and I, we went away and we were speaking at a marriage and family conference, and it was the keynote speaker was an older man, so we were younger then, older man from the US actually, and he was speaking on the power of a father's affirmation, and we were meant to kind of help to sort of pray for people, after the session, and my wife was just like, honey, I actually need to be prayed for. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll pray for you. And she's like, no, I want to get him to pray for me. And so she waited in line for this man, for this older man to kind of, and and he said, what can I do for you? And she said, or what do you want? And she said, can I just get a hug? She just needed a father's hug, a father's embrace. And yeah, so I think when you understand as a daughter that that's what you're looking for, that's really helpful. But certainly, if fathers can learn before these things happen, all the better. Again, you're not wounding your daughter, even though it might be unintentionally. You're not leaving her with a wound.
Yeah, and that resonates with me so much because I know that I've had a lack of healthy masculine in my life. And just to have healthy masculine and to be hugged or to be supported by a healthy masculine, not romantically, but just to have that presence is something that is so needed. I mean, by me, it can't be all feminine, which is beautiful. I love the feminine, but there needs to be a balance. And at one point I realized, wait a minute, this is out of balance and I need to find some healthy masculine. And it's very hard to find healthy masculine. I feel like I'm sad to say that. And now that is one reason that I'm switched to coaching men for the healthy masculine to heal these. To me, to just let men know you're okay as you are. We've all been through it. We all have wounds, but you are divine as you are. You don't have to do anything else to deserve love.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Just be present, you know.
Right.
Listen. Yeah, exactly. Offer what you do have. I don't need you to solve all of my problems. Yeah. And
No.
again, men have a fear of that they can't offer that. And so they remove themselves in that situation. It's not that those men don't exist. It's just that there's all of these other things going on that are preventing them from moving forward in those moments. What I use the word passivity, and it's not meant to be a harsh word to anyone, but men have this natural tendency. Guy by the name of Stephen Clark, who was a sociologist at Yale, he studied men for 15 years, and that's what he said in the end was men have this natural tendency to avoid social responsibility. In other words, men have this natural tendency to fall into passivity socially in the home as husbands, as fathers, but also spiritually, like as it can be church leaders, it can, yeah, it's you know, a man sort of not stepping in to pray, like you go to a church and you ask for would somebody pray for me? And more often than not, it's going to be a wonderful woman, kind-hearted woman who comes and prays for you. And so as men, we have to learn to reject passivity, resist that natural tendency and rise over that and give it a go, and see. It's amazing when again, you don't have to have all of the answers. You just have to offer what you have, even as limited as that might be. It's something, and it's something that very few men are offering. So, mm.
Yeah, that's very true. So we were talking about a chart about young boys um, before we started this show. Can you tell me about the chart? Tell us about the chart and about the events in life, the joys.
Yeah, so there was this study that was done in Australia. It was, but again, and I think this could be transferred to anywhere in the world, and certainly in Western nations at least. And it was a group of 30,000 people, male and female, and they ranged in ages of 12 to 55. And it was all to do with life satisfaction of happiness. And there were like at least half a dozen particular areas that they focused on. And so these 30,000 people went through this study, and they ended up plotting on a graph the outcomes and what they discovered. I mean, it's a really long report. His name's Dr. Adrian Tamain. He's a sociologist with RMIT, Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. And so you can download that report online. Um, and there's all kinds of graphs. This particular graph wasn't able to find online. I was able to get that from him. But what it did is it charted um, life satisfaction for ages 12 to 55. And so it started off with 12 years of age was the optimum. That's when people were most happy, again, in that 12 to 55. Maybe they were a lot happier even at 10, I don't know, but they started at 12, and then it sort of tapered down a little to 14. And then there was this massive chasm, massive drop between the ages of 14 and 16. And then it came up again, but not as high as it was at 14, but up to 18. And then it plateaued out. And then there was this little blip between ages 40 and 50, the classic midlife crisis. And then it kind of again plateaus out to 55. And so what was shocking to me when I saw that is that, you know, people talk about the midlife crisis, where men kind of get lost and can do harmful things, and because they have no vision for the rest of their lives. They've kind of reached the pinnacle of where they thought they wanted to be. What's staggering is that this was a little blip on the radar as opposed to this massive chasm that between the ages of 14 and 18. And it was so much so that I needed to phone this guy and speak with him, and he took my call. We had a big long conversation about it, and he said, I said, what happened at 16, like to turn it around? Because that's a massive dive, like massive tailspin here. So what happened? What was the instigator to turn this around? And he said it was ultimately it's parental intervention. And I'm like, really? Okay. And he said, yeah, what you don't see, this picture is a picture of a healthy person in this age range. What you don't see is that if without the parental intervention, people continue to drop down into at-risk youth, potentially suicide. Um, but here at the healthy level is parents intervene. They kind of see, hey, my son or my daughter's not doing really well, sitting real low in the water. We need to do something. We need to involve a counselor or whatever, and things begin to turn around, and slowly. Um, what also struck me on that is I sort of think, well, hang on a minute, like why? Why does it need to go down so far? Like why? Like and why is it that at age 18 through to effectively 55, can we not be as happy as we were at 14? And you can kind of, think about things like, well, we got bills to pay and got to go to work and all of those things. But I and other people who are involved in like rites of passage for that age range, that sort of mid-teens, kind of, early to late teens sort of age range, we agree with this that what happens is if you actually get them earlier, get them before that plummet. Again, it's intentionality, right? Like
Right.
if you can get them at 14. Like, and instead of them having to go through that, then what if they'll still have a bit of a dip, no doubt, but maybe they'll recover a lot quicker and maybe they can actually have happier lives in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s as opposed to kind of, you know, having less happiness, less joy in their lives. So, that I guess continues to inspire me to continue to reach out with parents with teenagers and help provide that opportunity for them to have those kinds of experiences because it's a long-term thing. This is the rest of their lives. It's not just, the moment that they turn 14 or 15 or 16, right, 17 or 18, but actually having a clear and compelling vision for what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman. You cannot become what you cannot define. So being able to define what that is and for them to own that and to have like a compass again and a guide, to help navigate through those tricky times in life and to have that moment where, they're invited up and into and welcomed into this new identity, this new season of life, and dad playing an active part in that and dad and mum together kind of, um, you know, offering those, this is what's expected of you now that you've reached this particular milestone. I mean, we tend not to have these times out to kind of to do that. And there's ultimately three stages of a rite of passage. So very, very quickly, there's the leaving or the separation. To actually leave the unknown, like this can't be done at home, really. It can't, not as well as it can be away. You actually need to be taken away from all that's known. And so there's that. That's the first part about it. And then what's called the transition or the transformation. This is when all of these things actually take place. And then there's the return or the reincorporation. So you return home differently and are treated differently. And again, when you've experienced that, like it changes everything. Do you mind if I share these three quotes with you from three sort of different authors on that particular sort of topic? Do you mind if I do that?
I
I've
would love
I've
for
got
you
a
to share it. Yeah.
print out here. So the first guy is a guy by the guy. His name's Michael Mead, and he's done a lot of work with like tribes in Africa and so on. So here's what he has to say. He says, in many tribal cultures, it is said that if boys were not initiated into manhood, if they were not shaped by the skills and love of elders, then they would destroy the culture. If the fires that innately burn inside youths are not intentionally and lovingly added to the hearth of community, they will burn down the structures of culture just to feel the warmth. In other words, hey, bad things happen when fathers and communities don't initiate their sons into manhood. So the first two are about sons, the final one's about daughters. So the final two quotes though are a guy by the name of Steve Biddulph. Now we claim him as as our own, which is what Australians tend to do when somebody does well. Um, he lives in Tasmania, like an island state that's south of Australia. Um, and but he's originally from England, but he's world renowned as a psychologist and author. He's written tons of books over the last 4 decades. He's a man I respect immensely. He would be in his probably late 70s now, I'm guessing. And here's what he says in his book, Raising Boys. He says, traditionally, two things were done to help young men into adulthood. First, they were taken on and mentored into adulthood by one or more men who cared about them and taught them important skills for living. And second, at certain stages of this mentoring process, the young men were taken away by the community of older men and initiated. This meant being put through some serious growing up processes, including testing, sacred teaching, and new responsibilities. And the reality is something that Steve says in his book, Manhood, and then he released this book called The New Manhood, is He said every culture, every community had these rites of passage prior to the Industrial Revolution, and we
Mm.
got to get them back ultimately. So finally, for daughters, because it's not just about boys. This is not just about. It's not just for boys. We think about initiation to manhood, rites of passage for boys and stuff. We get that, or we may have heard of that, but we certainly don't necessarily hear about it for girls. But here's what he says in his book, Raising Girls. Is he says this. He says sometime between 14 and adulthood, a girl needs some kind of marker event, a growing up rite. Girls have to be deliberately, there's that kind of word, intentionality again, and proactively launched into healthy womanhood. When this is done well, the results are impressive. A girl takes charge of her life and begins to make her unique way in the world. I mean, the, this idea of rites of passage and fathers being involved in that is so very important. And this is something you and I discussed offline or online, but not in this forum, was biologically speaking, from the level of the chromosomes. A woman has two X chromosomes, and a male has an X and a Y chromosome. It's the Y chromosome. It's what the man sort of brings that ultimately, again, biologically speaking, um, determines the biological sex of the child. It's going to be a boy or it's going to be a girl based on that Y chromosome. What fathers don't realize, especially during those teenage years, he is just as needed to be able to, um, again, affirm his son's masculine identity and his daughter's feminine identity. It plays a role in that. To be able to say your femininity is good to his daughters and your masculinity is good. And saying all of that, like being able to, he's already done the groundwork for that. He can he the son has learnt from him. I've got a strength, but I don't use it to abuse. I use it to help build up others. So yeah, he gets what masculinity is and she gets what femininity is. Because he's working in partnership, in tandem with their mother. Yeah. Anyway,
Well, that's beautiful. Yeah, no, and yeah, that is the healthy masculine. And if someone's watching and they're struggling with that, I mean, maybe you're stumbling, but I mean, there's always a path forward, right? And the best thing to, I mean, is self-awareness. I mean, once we're self-aware, then we can go anywhere. But if we're not aware, that's the block. But yeah, so I mean, having these conversations is so important for to really spread the awareness and to live an intentional
yeah,
life like you're doing.
yeah,
So
yeah.
tell us
There-
about
There's
fathering.
there's
Oh, go
not
ahead.
there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
That there's this isn't just you. And this is what men I think tend to believe. It's just me that's failing, or it's just me that doesn't know what I'm doing. I'm kind of like it's most men. So yeah, it's like, okay, I'm gonna reach out, I'm gonna talk to other men or talk to a counselor or somebody who can help take them to another level for sure.
Right, right.
And
Because
and
we've
that
all been
requires
there.
courage. That requires courage to take that next step. It is a path, and courage is required. That's the only prerequisite, really, is that little bit of courage. I again, immediately thought of that movie, We Bought a Zoo with Matt Damon, and Matt Damon's character teaches his kids about, I'm going to get it wrong, but it's like, all you need is like 5 seconds or 10 seconds of courage, to step out and to take a risk. And because if you don't do that, you won't necessarily end up with something really good. But by courageously stepping out, there's something potentially on the other side. Sure, you could be rejected, but or it could go bad or whatever. But And more often than not, there's something really good for you out of courage. And even if nothing, the fact that you stepped out in courage is huge. It's like, wow, I did something that I didn't think that I could have done, and I feel stronger because of it, so
Very true. Yes, and we've all been there. I mean, no one is, yeah, we're all imperfect, imperfectly perfect. So, yeah. So,
yeah.
Darren, I want to hear about fathering adventures. Can you tell us a little, I mean, tell us about fathering adventures and where people can find you?
Yes, so Fathering Adventures is an organization that I founded, again, as you said in your intro, back in 2008, July 2008, we officially launched. And yeah, it's all about experientially equipping and empowering men as fathers, all men, fathers and sons, fathers and daughters. We have what we refer to as our adventure experiences. So two different age groups, ages 7 to 13 and 13 years and over, to no maximum age limit. So we've actually had dads bring their sons and their daughters out from the US and Canada and Europe and Malaysia, and they fly in from all over the world, and and as old as well, internationally at least, we had once one dad from Spokane, Washington, flew his 25-year-old son in, and he was going to be married the next week. And I sort of thought, wow, that's brave, that's courageous. Like, how bad would it have been to have returned with, an injury or something, and but he came out, and his dad realized, recognized, this is kind of going to be my last hurrah with my son, this last big trip with my son, and so I want it to be meaningful, and he actually used the other himself, but also myself and some other men to really speak into his son's life, um, in regards to what marriage, helping to prepare him for marriage as a husband. You're about to enter into this new season of life. And so here's what you need to know. And so, but we go out and we do these outdoor activities. Again, snorkeling, scuba diving on the Outer Great Barrier Reef. We uh, whitewater rafting down the Tully River. We hike to the summit of a mountain. Um, but there's in the midst of all of that, there's some coaching. There's some presentations that I give. We break them up into some small groups. Three, we call them the rafting groups because there's three father-son pairs per whitewater raft. And they don't just raft together, but they actually debrief with some questions that I have after the presentations. But there's some very intentional uh, other adventures, which are these relational adventures, these what we refer to as manhood adventures or womanhood adventures with the daughters, because again, it's sons and daughters separately, but um, and it's things like publicly affirming them. So, we don't throw them into the deep end. We teach them, right? We coach them. These are the three things that every son needs to hear from their dad. These are the three things that every daughter needs to hear from their dad. And then once they've learnt those things, then over the coming days, there's an opportunity where fathers will speak those things out, very uniquely, to their son or the daughter. There's conversation on the side of the mountain, on the side of the hill, about where the son or the daughter gets to hear their dad's story, and it's a story that's actually invited because we get the son or the daughter to initiate the conversation by asking a question in and around their father's story, so that he or she can get to know their dad and understand why he is the way that he is. Right? Stuff that I wish that I had been able to ask my dad when I was a teenager, as opposed to 3 weeks before he died. Um, and and then obviously it all sort of climaxes. There's the final rite of passage ceremony. So it's that moment where sons are called out of boyhood and called up and into young manhood, or authentic manhood, depending on the age, and again with the girls as well. Boys, we use swords, um, and girls, we use tiaras. So don't have to take a tiara, but yeah, father will speak out again in conjunction with wife back home or whatever. They have the conversation beforehand. Sometimes they need to sort of phone back and have a conversation about it sort of towards the end there. And but then ultimately that's where it shifts. That's where it changes. These expectations again of you now that you are a young man or a young woman or an authentic man or authentic woman. This is what that looks like back home. From here on in, things have shifted, things have changed. It's that reintegration, reincorporation, that return home. It's different. Yeah. So, yeah, the younger version, we really focus on the fathers and so the kids aren't in the sessions with the dads. It's just we help the fathers to be the fathers that their sons or daughters need them to be. But with the older sons and daughters at 13 and over, we have fathers and sons side by side and fathers and daughters side by side, and it's kind of like learning a new language together. And again, it's so that they can succeed, so they can win, so they can really just enjoy their relationship for the rest of their lives. Something that they can look back, this shared experience, they can look back and say, "Hey, Dad, do you remember when you took me, to tropical North Queensland and we did all of these fun things and you told me about life and you told me about your life? Thank you so much for that." I mean, I'm picturing 20, 25 years down the track, when they're parents themselves, and they're kind of like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that meant the absolute world to me, Dad." So yeah, it's good. It's good. I really, it, I remember in some very early correspondence that we had, I quoted Gerard Manley Hopkins, who said, "What I do is me, for this, for that I came." And this is, for me, this is why I exist. This is why I'm here. I'm here for this purpose, for this specific time, and uh, and that's really reassuring to know. It's kind of nice to know that there's that I'm doing something that again transcends. It'll transcend my lifetime. It's so beautiful when you get these, mid to late teens kind of say, they're obviously really thought about it. And this the change. Remember, I said that second phase is that transition or the transformation. So now all of a sudden you get these, 15, 16, 17-year olds kind of they've gone through this, they've thought about this, and they're like, I hope you're still around when my son or daughter is my age. And I remember in the early days, I would always say, well, where else am I going to be? Of course. But I do the math now and I kind of realize, oh, geez, I'll be 80. Like, hopefully there's somebody else that's taken my place then that I will be able to mentor, to be able to duplicate and replicate myself. So that's what we're meant to do, right? Yeah, not just to have been and then gone, but actually to make a difference, but raise up others around you who can then go on and make a difference. It's why you do what you do. It's why I do what I do, and that's the point of life. You know, let's
Yes,
leave the
great.
let's leave the world in a much better place than that which we found it, and we can't do it on our own. You know, I love that. There's a quote by Margaret Mead, the late Margaret Mead. Famous anthropologist, American, who he said never doubt um, never doubt that a thoughtful group of citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So one person can't do it, but a collective together can absolutely change our world. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it is. I was going to ask you to say the final words, but let's just stop it at that because that's beautiful. I love it. I feel very touched by this conversation and all of your wisdom and your dedication to your legacy. And I can see that how grounded you are in your connection to God and your connection to the interconnectedness of all of life. And you know your purpose and what a joy that is to share that with you. I mean, share this time with you and to to be a benefit of your wisdom. So thank you so much, Darren. I really appreciate it.
Well,
Anybody that's watching, yes, please reach out to Darren because I mean, what a joy and what a great source of life you are.
well, thank you for the opportunity, and again, let's stay connected. And if there's anything I can help you with, just let me know.
All
Just an
right, and
email
every
away.
yeah, thanks. And everyone out, everybody that could be watching this, make sure you check out Darren's website. What is your website?
It's fatheringadventures.com.au.
Okay, fatheringadventures.com.au. Got it. All right. So,
And we're on the socials and all that sort of stuff as well. Look, I'm not great with technology. These telephones that everybody's got and uses these days. People use them for all kinds of things. I've only just started using them really as a camera, but really up until recently. So for a long time now, I've used it as a phone. And then eventually, when my first son moved out of home, and then subsequent sons moved out of home, I taught myself how to text. Actually, my eldest son taught me how to text, but then I actually forgot, and I learned. And this was back on the old Nokia phones where you'd have to click like the number one 3 times to get C. Like it was a really long drawn out process, but. That's how I learned how to text is to remain connected. You've got to kind of learn, okay, where are my kids? What's how can I reach out to them and how can I remain connected with them? Send them little messages. They poke fun at me because every time I send a text message to them or an email to them, if there's a reason to email them, I always sign off with love always, Dad. And they've all asked me individually, they've all sort of said, Dad, do you have some kind of signature or something like that has that love always, Dad? And I'm like, no. And they go, really? You type that out every single time? And I said, yeah, I do. And they said, why do you bother? And I said, because it's important that you know that
Ah,
I love you always. And anyway, so
oh, that's beautiful. All right. So everybody that's watching, you can always find Darren on Facebook and give him some time because now that we know he's not that tech savvy, give him some time to.
I, I shared all of that to say I'm not on Instagram. So yeah, Facebook,
Okay.
LinkedIn, and website.
Wonderful. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you, Mariquita.